Penn State's decision to fire James Franklin, I think, is going to go down as one of the most impactful coaching changes in college football history. And I am fascinated by this decision, both in what this means for Penn State next, what this means for sort of the ripple effects I think that this coaching change is going to have, and how much college football has changed. If you're new here, I'm Lucy. I talk about college football. Please subscribe. So Penn State finally decides to pull the plug on James Franklin after back-to-back losses to UCLA and Northwestern, where Penn State was a 20-point favorite in both of those games. And we've heard this example so many times over the last few weeks, but it is worth just saying again because it's so batshit crazy that 3 weeks ago Penn State was a top 5 team in the country that was 2 overtimes away from beating a very, very good Oregon team and officially getting that like big game James narrative off of his back. But they lost that game in pure Penn State fashion. They lost the whiteout, another top 10 loss for James Franklin. And I knew at that moment James was done. I did not think it would happen 2 weeks later. No one foresaw them losing to UCLA and Northwestern. But I knew at the end of the year he would be done because that was sort of the narrative. And I understand why they made the decision to fire him, because you've shown that you've reached your peak. We know what your ceiling is. And your ceiling is where most programs would love to be. But there are still Penn State fans alive that remember them winning national championships, and that changes things. And when this was the year that James Franklin had gotten everything he's ever wanted, Penn State gave him money, $3 million a year to hire Jim Knowles, the highest paid coordinator in college football, money in the portal to go get wide receivers to finally give that offense the boost it needs to compete, because that's been the issue with Penn State for years. They cannot give you the deep threat in the offense. They don't have the explosive plays, but they're so good everywhere else. So he finally gets that. You have one of the best running back duos in the country in Singleton and Katron Allen. Like, everything has come together, and Drew Aller returns, which Penn State fans will probably be like, we really weren't that happy about that. But Drew Aller's a good football player. He's up and down, but he's a good football player. You had everything. Everything worked out perfectly for Penn State to be the best they've ever been. And James Franklin told you himself, this is the best roster I've ever had. And you can't win the big game. That's, you know what? Okay. That's what it is. Oregon is a very good football team. Dan Lanning is batshit crazy in the best way. Like, in that football game, when I look back at that Oregon game, what the win-loss comes down to for me, and it's such a small moment, but it's so pivotal and, like, such a perfect example of what James Franklin at Penn State has been, which was them punting at their own 36, I believe. That's not going to win you football games. And then Dan Lanning's like, we don't even have a punter on the roster. We're going to go for it every fourth down ever under the sun. And I'm not saying that James Franklin needed to go full Dan Lanning, but that was the moment that you're like, yeah, he's just never going to change. He cannot manage in games well. But you had this same sort of flip side of like, you know what? He is consistent. So yeah, consistently will lose to Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan. Will consistently beat everybody else. Will beat Purdue. Will beat Northwestern. Will beat UCLA until that stopped happening. And so they go to UCLA, and that football team is dead upon arrival. Not an ounce of energy on that field. Unbelievably bad. Same thing happens against Northwestern. Penn State, significantly more talented than UCLA and Northwestern. Inexcusable losses. And so the one thing that James Franklin was not doing, which was losing those games that you should win, he finally did. And he did it back-to-back. And Penn State has now become the Florida State of the season, where very high expectations, insanely bad results. And so they made the decision to fire him with a $50 million buyout, which he has, you know, a kind of a typical contract where if he gets another job, Penn State will only pay the difference between what he's making at that job versus what he was going to make at Penn State. So it might not be $50 million, but that was still a bet they were willing to play. So we would rather pay $50 million and not have you here than not pay $50 million and have you here. I was not shocked by the decision at all. I was very shocked by the timing. It didn't really feel like something I was expecting to see mid-season. But with making this decision and the way that you made it, with what James Franklin has produced at Penn State, you have to have your next guy. Like, he has to be elite. Because James Franklin is a good college football coach. I know he has silly in-game management. I know he can't win the big game, but he is a good college football coach. There's a small pool of candidates that are better than him, and you have to feel pretty confident that you have that in the bag to go fire James Franklin. Because this is the example I always love to use. Nebraska was winning 9 games a year with Bo Pelini, and they were like, that's not enough. They fire him, and then their entire football program goes to hell for 15, 20 years, which I do think is ironic because Matt Rule is right now the leading candidate to take that job, and he gave like a presser answer which was very, I love Nebraska, and I love Penn State, which is like, okay, you didn't say no. For me, I don't think Matt Rule is a step up from James Franklin. That feels like a very lateral move to me. I understand wanting to make a change, especially with the way the last 2 weeks have gone. Who is that guy? Because there's a handful of coaches that I think are better than James Franklin, and I know I make a lot of fun of him, but Kurt Cignetti's not picking up that call. I don't think Marcus Freeman is leaving Notre Dame. I don't think Matt Rule is at the level that is better than James Franklin. I think they're pretty much on the same sort of scope for me. Matt Campbell, and that's like me being biased, I just want to get rid of him. I don't know who it's going to be. And this is either going to go one of two ways for Penn State. You are going to finally get somebody who now you're going to have to spend all this money to get. You're going to have to spend all this money to give them the assistance they want and the resources they want and change the culture of your program for this person, which costs a lot of money when they're already spending a lot of money to renovate Beaver Stadium. They're spending money right now. And the Big Ten is talking to private equity. Boo, please don't do that. But that will, probably offset some of the costs. And so it's either going to work or it's not going to. And which I know that's like obviously the only two options. It's going to work and you're going to be at Ohio State, or you're going to go 7-5 for the next 10, 15 years. It's a very nuanced situation. I do think it's insane. What I think is going to happen with this is I think there's going to be such an intense ripple effect throughout college football where there are head coaches who are on the hot seat who probably felt pretty comfortable they could make it through this season and next season, and now that pressure is on. I don't remember a college football season that week 7 we have this many open jobs. UCLA, Arkansas, UAB, Oregon State, Virginia Tech, Penn State. There's probably 10 more I'm forgetting about. Now, if you're Hugh Freeze at Auburn, if you're Billy Napier at Florida, if you're Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, Penn State was willing to pull the plug on James Franklin after 3 straight losses. That was enough for them to call it, despite the fact that he is the second winningest coach in Penn State football history. That put the pressure on these other schools because, you don't get to be as patient now, especially when everybody is looking for a candidate to fill their role. I think this works out. Obviously, it doesn't work out for James Franklin in the sense that you got fired, and that's sad, and, you're getting $50 million. I don't really feel that bad for you, but James Franklin can go take a job for a lot less money because Penn State's going to be paying whatever he was getting before, and that money can be invested into whatever football team he goes to. I foresee Virginia Tech makes a lot of sense to me. He knows the area. I don't know if they're trying to, recreate the okay, we just took a Penn State guy and that didn't work with Brent Pry. But I think James Franklin will find a job. It's also stipulated in his contract that he has to. I don't know how you enforce that, but whatever. But I think this really moves the needle where, I didn't know if I saw Wisconsin firing Luke Fickell, which they absolutely should. It's just not working out. I think that happens quicker now. I think Florida's going to be quicker to move on from Napier. I think it's one more bad loss and that's done. Auburn loves to fire coaches all the time. It's their favorite hobby. So Hugh Freeze is out. Carolina, you're probably going to want to move on from Bill Belichick after how stupid this is all gone. I think that this is going to have a much stronger ripple effect than just the future of Penn State. I think this is really going to make this the most chaotic coaching carousel offseason. Well, we can't even say offseason because this is all happening in the middle of the year that we've seen in college football history. If you like this video, subscribe, follow me across my social medias. Maybe we'll talk about Bill Belichick next. I know it's been a minute, but it moved. That's why there are boxes over there.